Hey guys, welcome. It's 6 o'clock on Tuesday. I'm in my pretend blue room once again. You can see the green screen there a little bit. Let's hide that. I hope you're great. Whether you're watching this live with me on a beautiful summer's evening, a Tuesday, or if you're watching it on catch up, welcome. This is the 12th in the series of seminars designed to boost your health, and today we're focusing on one of my favorite subjects, which is stress. Tonight I'm drinking vodka. Every little helps. Okay, so today we're talking about stress, and particularly how to de-stress. And it's so important because, of course, the linkage between how stressed you are and activation of your sympathetic nervous system, which long-term activation will suppress, sedate, interfere with your immune system. Also interferes with all sorts of other parts of your body, as you well know. The best way to get a sense of what the sympathetic nervous system does and what the stress response is when you're a kid and you're leaning back on your chair, it's got four legs and you're on the back two, and you're just rocking backwards as cool as you want, and then you go a little bit too far back and you suddenly go into that startled response. When that happens, you can almost feel your nervous system kind of going as you get in touch with a little blast of adrenaline and a stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, there's nothing sympathetic about it. It's not kind and gentle. It's all about activation. And its opposite friend, the parasympathetic, is the part that calms, rejuvenates, restores. But today, our focus is all going to be about about stress and how to deal with it. I've been asked a lot of questions recently, both after the last call and also on the uni course I'm teaching, about emotions and their relationship to stress and also their relationship to reality. Welcome to all those people on the call. Great to see you. So it was an interesting conversation that Dalai Lama had with, I think it was Richard Gere, the famous Hollywood actor, and they're having a chat. And Richard Gere says, I think that one of the things I find most difficult is the whole idea that emotions aren't real, because, when you feel angry, when you feel stressed, it's completely real. And the Dalai Lama laughs, as he often does. And he says, well, they're not real. We have real hormones. We have real nervous systems creating experience. But he says, if you're in a movie and your job is to convince people that you are a bank robber or a cowboy or something, a hitman, then you step into that role and you completely inhabit it and you deliver that performance. The emotions you have, are they real? Well, they may be, but they're not really real because you're pretending to take that role. And you do it very well. You can step into that. And Richard Gere kind of goes, I guess that's true. And we've all had that experience. And one of the things I often talk about, hello Claudine, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? One of the things that I often tell a story about is, imagine you have a friend, right? A really good friend, like many of the people on the call today. And you see them in the morning. This is imagining that we actually go to work and we see them, of course. Remember that, guys. Anyway, you see them in the morning and you wave at them, you go, hey, how you doing? And they look at you, turn away and walk in the other direction. And you're like, that's a bit odd because I waved at them. Yeah, never mind. You're a little bit upset, but not too bad. A bit later on, you just send them a text. Hey, hope you're good. Maybe have a coffee later. Send it. And on iPhones and stuff, it tells you they've received it. Yeah, because the little tick saying it's been received. But you get nothing back. So a little bit later on, you WhatsApp them. Hey, how's it going? Hope everything's fine. Nothing comes back. Then you email. I'm just wondering if everything's okay because, I've tried to contact you a few times and not get anything back. Are you all right? Nothing back. So you ring them. Immediately the call gets dropped. They reject it. So now you're starting to get a little bit worried. You're like, I must have said something. I must have done something that has upset my good friend. I don't know what I've done, but clearly they're quite annoyed with me. They're quite upset with me. And you start to feel that feeling of dread as to whether the friendship isn't going to survive. What's happened? So you send them another email. Just checking you're okay. You seem a little bit off this morning. You haven't responded to any of my emails. Everything okay? You and me okay? And you get an email back going, can't talk. Don't want to talk. Wow. Okay. I definitely must have done something wrong. And now your feelings are really quite strong that something has happened. Yeah. You're going home in the evening and your friend runs up to you. And you're like, what's going to happen now? And they go, I hope you're okay. I've had an awful day. He said, this morning, I left my glasses at home and I'm really blind. I can barely see anyone, so I've been ignoring people all day. And also I had an ear infection. I went swimming. My ears all blocked up, so I can't hear that well. And my email's been broken. I think someone's hacked into it. And I left my phone at home. The kids have just been messing about with it, answering random phone calls or deleting things. So it's just been one of those days. And now you understand why it is your friend hasn't been in contact with you at all. And suddenly your emotions start to change about it. You're like, oh, okay. One of those things. But all day long you've been stewing in those emotions, which were real emotions. They were genuine experiences, genuine neurotransmitter releases, and neurology being switched on, and physiological changes in your body. They were real, but based on something that was inaccurate. So real or not real? Well, they were real feelings, but based on a misunderstanding, based on a non-real experience, something that didn't actually happen. So we can get trapped in thinking the emotions we have are genuine and accurate. And that's not always true. And many of us have experienced that. Sometimes you'll get a text from someone and you go, what? And you send something back annoyed because of how outrageous, and you realize you've completely misread or misread the nuance or tonality of that text. And then you've started that cycle of misunderstanding again. Another question I was asked was, but people make you angry, don't they? And this is also, people make you stressed. Very, very core thing to think about. Can people really make you angry or really make you stressed? Now, as we go around the world, it really feels like somebody does something and then we feel stressed or angry as a result of it. That's our genuine experience, and pretty much everyone on the call would have had that experience of what that feels like to be triggered. That's the word we use, isn't it? Triggered by somebody else's action or a situation or an environment that makes us feel this way. Notice the word makes us. But it's actually not completely true. It's not completely true because it's not them, it's not their actions that make us feel that way, even though it really feels that way. There's a little gap between what they did and what we make that mean, how we interpret that. And we can interpret that in a millisecond as a result of our good friend neuroplasticity. Should we have a quick look at neuroplasticity? I know people, for some reason, really quite enjoy this when I go, oh, not that one, that one. When I go tiny. It's Tiny Phil. Hello. So neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is this. We send a signal, let's say, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this on a podcast, it's going to make slightly less sense, but we'll see how we get on. So we send a signal down the red neuron, and at the end of the red neuron, it has a little gap where it's got to jump either to the orange one or to the green one. And let's say the orange one is stress. Okay. So we said, just move that around. Didn't mean to do that. So we send the signal down the red neuron. There we go. And when we do that, in this case, it jumps through to the orange neuron and triggers a stress response. Neuroplasticity is the fact that the more you use a certain part of your nervous system, the stronger and more important and significant it becomes in your whole nervous system's wiring. So the more you use a particular pathway, the stronger it becomes. So in this case, if we send more signals down that red neuron that land in the... Oh, just jump to slide there. Let's do it again. So here it comes. Goes to the orange. If we keep on sending signals down the orange pathway, then we start to get a change in the shape of our nervous system where the orange pathway moves towards the red pathway. The little gap gets shorter and narrower, and therefore it's much easier for that signal to jump, carried by neurotransmitters across the synapse, to the orange pathway of stress. And not only does the orange pathway move towards this red pathway, but the green pathway, which is the pathway to calm, goes on a little journey, goes wandering off. It goes, I'm not being used here, I'll go somewhere else. Now it becomes much, much more difficult to jump the gap from the red pathway to the green one, because there's physically a larger gap to be carried over. This is neuroplasticity, and it's a problem because, of course, the more we run pathways of stress, the easier it becomes to get into stress, which is why we say states are contagious. The more you're in a state, the more you feel it in yourself, and the more you can bring it to other people because you're suddenly in a very responsive, reactive way to people. But also neuroplasticity is great, which means if we spend time triggering the pathway, so we push the signal from the red neuron to the lovely green neuron of calm, if we keep on pushing that signal across, which is more tricky because it's further away, then after a very short time, because neuroplasticity is always on, the green pathway will move closer to the red one, and now the orange one will move away and fade away. So this is always going on. It's always going on. Neuroplasticity is just a fact. That's what happens, and it happens all the time. It's always happening. It's always responsive to change. So if you spend a lot of time experiencing the world as a stressful place, it's very easy then to get into stress. So that's why we can have an instant response to someone. Someone looks at us in a certain way, we may suddenly feel ourselves getting stressed, getting hot, getting bothered, getting angry. And that's neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity has made that pathway so close, it doesn't really take very much, that what's called the threshold is very low for that signal to jump over and cause a stress response. But in that little gap, that's really where we have the ability to make a choice, to respond in one way or another. Now, of course, through this wiring process of neuroplasticity, the more we get used to responding in a stressed way to particular things people say or things that happen, the more it seems that that thing has caused our feelings. But it's still not true. That thing occurred, and then we triggered a pathway. We didn't mean to, but we did trigger a pathway. We jumped a little gap, and we got into that stress pathway. So, is the stress response real? Are the hormones, transmitters real? Absolutely. Is the event causing it? Not completely. The event is like an invitation. This is something I'd really suggest you consider as an interesting conversation. Instead of thinking of things as triggers, they triggered me, they made me, change it to they invited me. They invited me. Now, if someone's inviting you, like to a party or to a football match or to a rave or to a heavy rock concert or to a ballet, when they've invited you, you have an option to accept or decline. That's a true invitation. It's not a compulsion. You don't have to go. You ought to go. It's a genuine invitation. Would you like to come here and do this with me? When you start to see people's behaviours that are in the past making your nervous system get all excited in a negative way, instead of thinking them as making you or causing you or triggering you, think they're inviting me. They're inviting me. And then ask yourself, do I want to accept or decline that invitation? Now, initially that'll feel quite tough because your nervous system is so used to going whoosh from one neuron to another. And so it will feel like there isn't a choice. It will feel like that's just how I respond. But it's really waking up to that idea that this is an invitation. And if you want to know more about this, then the Do book is the place to go, where I talk a lot about this whole idea that people do stuff, people behave in certain ways, and then we respond unconsciously and often unintentionally to their behaviors, but usually in a way that's not that useful for us. So identifying that this is something that we are generating rather than something they've made happen to us is so important. Now, on one of the courses I was running, a university course, we were talking about the stuff in America at the moment, and somebody was saying, that makes me angry. It makes me angry what they did to George Floyd and what's going on in America with the race inequality. What about that? Now, that's a good question. And the answer is still the same. That thing happened, and then we have a response to it. Now, our first initial response may be emotional because, those pathways are being triggered. But if we look at history, if we look at people like Martin Luther King and Gandhi as examples of making change within very difficult circumstances, they may have got angry about it, but they also realized that was not going to change the situation. They needed to take action, and these guys particularly took peaceful action. They chose, even though their neurology wanted to go into being annoyed and cross and outraged, they realized if they wanted to move things forwards, they needed to take a different emotional response to this very tricky and challenging event, and to instead trigger different pathways of creativity, pathways of passive non-violent communication, pathways of love and compassion, different pathways. And you can imagine how tricky that would be for the neurology, which is ready to jump into and angry, to have the capacity to pause that pathway that's ready to go. The trigger is just, on the edge of being pulled, and instead to jump into a different pathway, completely different pathway. But that's where change and stuff occurs in life, isn't it? That's where kind of real revolutionary change happens. That when we decide to not follow what our past has told us, what people do, and instead to say, I choose to respond to this very unfamiliar or possibly familiar situation in a different way. So we're getting some questions come in. Let's have a quick look what we got. Is that a typical setting for some of those on the autistic spectrum? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Maybe tell me a bit more about that, Debbie. What the typical setting? And Claudine says, I used the wrong pathways in the past. And now I have in the past weekend, and now I have a pain in my neck. Excellent, well done. And then we've got lots of people saying hi and how stressful life is and all sorts of stuff. Debbie, tell me a bit more about your question about autistic spectrum stuff. And then we'll answer it. Okay, so I don't know if Tony's on the call. He was asking me specifically about that. But anybody got any questions about this whole idea of emotions are real, but they are the result of, to some extent, past training, and sometimes they're a result of ancient evolutionary training. We talked about this before, that there's a natural bias within the nervous system to respond to negatives more strongly than positives. Yeah. So the more we can step out of existent pathways and ask ourselves, really important question, is this useful? Is this useful? Some of you may have heard me talk about the book, The 10 Questions. And in the 10 questions, there's an extra question. which I have talked about before in these seminars, but it's worth mentioning again. Which is this lovely woman I knew, because all the 10 questions came from talking to people, patients who said, I'll be talking to them, I'd be asking them a question, which is a cool thing you do when you coach. And I'd ask them a question, they go, ooh, now that is a really good question. And I kind of noted down these questions because you could see life changing. It's one of the things I find really interesting, those moments when you can literally see something shifting in someone's life, someone's future's different. And they often came as a result of interesting questions. So I wrote a book called The 10 Questions, which is full of those questions. And then I met this woman and she was telling me about this experience. She was working for the BBC and she was at a party and there was a famous playwright and she was doing some work in South Africa in Soweto around drama and townships. She thought it'd be really good to get this guy involved, and then she thought, what would people think if I went up and talked to him about it? Would they be positive or negative? What would they think of me? And would he be interested in it? Would he be bothered? Would it be difficult? She had all those normal kind of questions that we run in our heads. And eventually she went, what's really important here? She asked herself, what is really important here? And she thought, what's really important is I talk to that guy so we have a chance to see if he's interested in working with these kids in Soweto who really need every resource they can get. That's the most important thing. That's more important than my upset or what people think about me, anything like that. So she made that decision. And she turned to talk to the guy and he'd left the party. So she told me this story. She said, I really realised that's an interesting question, which is, what's really important here? What really matters here? And the same thing I think applies in this whole idea of what is your response going to be? By asking yourself, what is really important here? How do I want to bring myself to this moment? How do I want to bring myself to this moment? All right, we've got some other questions here, so let's answer these. So Debbie says, is it true in autistic patterns that they are closer to the orange pathway as a default? In this case, the orange pathway in our example was a stress pathway. It does depend. With autism, one of the things you can get is you can get a kind of hypersensitivity, so a readiness to jump into pathways of anxiety or fear, absolutely. But also you can get stepping away from certain emotional responses. So very often in autism they'll have responses that people don't predict that a normal interaction should have. Well, they'll say something and they'll take it very literally, or they won't get the emotional nuance of it. So it could be different pathways as well. Pathways more of disassociation, where they're almost observing. So less emotional pathways as well. Okay. Tony says, I'm here. Can you prove we have that space as I beat myself up when I miss it? Yeah, I don't know if you heard the story I talked about at the beginning about a friend who seems to blank you the whole day long, and you get more and more stressed about it and upset about it. At the end of the day, when you talk to them, you find out they weren't blanking you. Someone else has got their phone, their internet hasn't been working, they haven't been wearing their glasses today, so they haven't seen you. In that moment, you go, oh, you completely change how you respond to that event. So that is the gap, that we have this capacity to change. But as I said earlier, if we've spent a lot of time training ourselves into being very triggered, very responding to certain things, certain people, certain ways of being, then we'll have to be really on it to catch that triggering of the first neuron that leads to the second neuron that leads to the whole emotions. And sometimes we won't catch it, absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody on the call today, no matter how wise and well trained you are, including me, in the last couple of weeks, at least once, has found yourself in a shitty state when you really shouldn't, because we're now all evolved people who know all about this stuff, and sometimes some of even us lecture about it. So we would never, of course, we would never ever do this, but we do, right? And that's partly because of the training we've had of getting into bad states and that being familiar, partly because of our evolutionary wiring, all sorts of things. The very first thing you should do if you found that you've got into the wrong state, first of all, spot it, become aware of it. It's like they say in any addiction, very first thing is to notice that you're drinking too much or injecting too much or whatever, that you're doing that behavior. First thing, be aware. Second thing is be nice. Probably the worst thing you can do once you realize that you've triggered a pathway that you didn't mean to, that you didn't want to, that, you know, if you were able to really step back in hindsight, you wouldn't do it. Then you need to bring kindness to that. Beating yourself up just further wires you into stress, anger, self-loathing pathways, which again are more of the kind of pathways you don't want to be in. Good rule of thumb, remember we've talked, I'm sure many of you will know, we've talked about the pit. And the pit is defined as anything that doesn't make your life great or move your life forwards. So anything non-life enhancing. Really good way to spot the pit. You can drop it down, guys. What is the answer? What's one of the simplest ways to spot whether you're in the pit or not? I'm going to give you a few moments to think about that while I read through the other comments. It's easier to react with negative as a whole. There is, as I said, there's a slight bias within the nervous system to do it. I guess it is a bit easier, but it's not really easier because in the long run it makes life much more complicated. So generally, if you can pause and think how you want to respond, it makes life easier. Use the LP and the gap to alter the outcome in the self. Yes, absolutely. So the lightning process, mindfulness, CBT, lots of processes are all about holding that moment when you feel compelled to go down into the crappy neurons, instantly angry stress response neurons. You can notice that compulsion to do it, that feeling, that draw, that magnetic draw to it, and go, and no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Another example I often talk about is if you're on a bus and you're sitting next to somebody and they say, I hate people like you, then you may notice you start to have a response. Probably not a very positive response. But as you look at them, you notice they look like they're probably not mentally well. And they say, I hate people like you from the planet Venus. You drive me bonkers coming over in your spaceships, leaving bananas everywhere. And you're like, oh, okay. Now, how do you respond to when she says, I hate people like you? You're like, yeah, whatever. And that is an example again of the gap where we're realizing that's not an appropriate response, even though the trigger word's the same thing. I hate people like you. Now we realize it's I hate people like you from the planet Venus, leaving you bananas everywhere. You're like, yeah, you know what? I don't have to respond in that way. And again, it shows us that we have this response. With kids, you can get the same thing. If you remember young kids, they may go, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. Now, if somebody normally says that, you may feel quite upset. But if it's your kid saying it because you haven't given another ice cream when they just had one, you may go, yeah, whatever. You know, so we have this ability to use that gap in certain contexts where we haven't got that emotional avalanche coming at us. So if we have it there, we have it. We just need to work out how to mine that more effectively. Got some more questions here. What would you say to people who say that anger is a good thing, that it can spur us into action and make change? Interesting. So we've all been angry in the past, I'm sure, and possibly in the very recent past. When we look at it, if we had the full palette of emotions to choose from, the full banquet, the buffet of emotions, all the emotions that we've ever experienced in our lives, would we choose anger? That's a question. Now there may be times when you would, and they're quite few and far between. It's usually things like when you're being attacked. You know, when you're physically being threatened or attacked, you might be angry. That might be a useful behaviour. But in most of the other places where you've been angry, when you've been cross with your kids, annoyed with your partner, shouted at somebody in traffic, was it the most useful? Was it the most life enhancing? Was it that useful use of that moment in your life that you'll never have again? The chances are it wasn't. If you want to be motivated, there are better ways to get motivated than to be angry. I did see a talk once by an interesting guy. And he said, he was talking about people's mission. And he said, Do something you're passionate about. Now that could be something you love, or it could be something I'm furious that exists, that racism exists or this exists, and I want to do something about it. In that case, yeah, okay. That recognition, this is not okay, and changing it into action, completely fine. The problem is if you sit in that anger, you just go, oh, I'm just so annoyed about it, and then you don't do anything about it. So do you transmute it? Tony, can certain mental health conditions like borderline personality disorder make it harder than so-called normal people, like extremely sensitive people? So borderline personality disorder, which is a kind of medicalization of this inability to effectively manage your states. That's really what it is. People are not managing their states very well, and very often not second positioning, not thinking what's it like for the other person. It's a very common thing that you get. So you can change that if somebody wants to. We talked a lot about this last time. We talked about victim behavior when people take the victim role which is often linked to BPD. And extremely sensitive people. Extremely sensitive people, basically what's happened is their neurons have got so busy that it doesn't take very much to trigger that second pathway. A little tiny stimulus will switch it. But we've worked with loads of people with extreme sensitivities to chemicals, electromagnetic radiation, emotions, perfumes, and those things can be changed. So it is possible to change if you're open to the idea. If you've caused harm to others, it's hard to be kind to yourself. Interesting. So this is, again, a common thing that people say, how could I ever be kind to myself when I've done this wrong to other people? There's a question which is, does you beating yourself up help them in any way? Does that right that wrong? Does it make their lives better? All we've got then is now two people whose lives are getting messed up. So I would question that and ask yourself, is that important? Is it useful? Does that help? If you look at 12-step, one of the things they don't say, one of the steps is not beat yourself up. It's like, sort out your wrongdoings, make an inventory and go and apologise where appropriate and make good. But it doesn't say beat yourself up for it. And in fact, pretty much in no kind of therapeutic approach does it ever say beating yourself up is a great thing, because it isn't. Nobody wins. And in fact, what you do is you turn yourself into victim. That's what happens. We are human, and to feel nothing could have an adverse effect on our humanity. Interesting. Well, I'd question that a little bit. If we are aware of other people, aware of ourselves, and choose to bring as much kindness and compassion into the world, does that make us less human? Is that going to improve or decrease humanity? Is that going to help the species? Now, is it likely that the Dalai Lama, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, everyone else on that list lived a perfect life where they had no emotions that were negative? No, of course not. We are humans, and we don't get it right all the time. Absolutely. But maybe what we want to do is learn from that and reflect on that and go, right, how can I bring myself as well as I can to the next moment? So that would be my answer to that. We've got some answers here. Loss of sense of humour, a key sign of being the pit. Excellent. Well done, kids. If you don't spot it immediately and you're immersed in a bad state, can you still change that state and change that pathway, or does it have to get caught quickly? That's a good question. If we look at the example right at the top, when we talked about people, your friend apparently blanking you, you could be stewing in that all day. But as soon as they explain, I haven't, I wasn't ignoring you, my kids have got the phone and so on, immediately your emotions will change. So you don't have to spend the same amount of time getting out of that state as you did to get in it, or how long you've been in it. But certainly, the longer you're in a state, the more hormones you produce, the more neurology you switched on. Yeah, you've got a bit more work to do. So it's best to catch it as quickly as you can. But the other thing that's worth pointing out is, we've all been in rubbish states at some point, is when you've been in not a very good state, at some point, you get out of it. Now that may be in a minute, 5 minutes, a day, a week, a month, a year, but at some point you will get out of it. So if you can get out of it, why not bring it closer? Why not do it now if you're going to get out of it? At what point would you say it's helped to address the roots of an unhelpful pattern? A younger part, for instance? Or do you think we can often override the past pattern and part with repeated state change? Okay. So there's two slightly different models here. One is sometimes old events are kind of re-stimulating pathways, and we can spend a lot of time settling that pathway, but we keep on going back into an old conversation. Absolutely, sometimes our past can set us up to make running these pathways simpler and easier, negative pathways. So sometimes absolutely going back and resolving some stuff is fine. But equally, I would say it doesn't always have to be the case. For instance, when you work with phobias, as many of you on the call know, you can get rid of phobias pretty quickly. You don't really have to know very much about what was going on, what happened, why it happened. You can just resolve it. So I would always say, do the simplest thing first. So if just teaching someone to deeply relax allows them to access the state of relaxation and then go through world feeling not stressed anymore, that's fine. If you find that they keep on kicking back into some old event, then it may need clearing up. Would you recommend constant brain rehearsal in changing a response to a trigger, especially when the stress response has been reinforced over a number of years? Yeah, that might be a good approach. Again, it may be that there's some event you need to resolve that's just still, echoing in your system. If you're working hard and you're not getting the change you want, generally don't work harder, work differenter. So kind of think, right, have I missed something? Do I need some input from somebody else? Is there another way to look at this? Sometimes change is incremental, but if it's keeps on being tiny baby steps over months, then that would suggest something's missing in the process of change, in my experience. Okay, great questions. Thank you very much for this. Making me have to think and work, which is always good. Maybe not the working, but the thinking. So what we're going to do to finish, we've got another 20 minutes, but we're going to spend 20 minutes focusing on the other side of the conversation, which is, okay, how do we get calm? Now, one of the ways to get calm is to catch it, to stop it, and then to shift ourselves in a calm space. Another thing, of course, is a bit like going to the gym. If we spend more time calm, then it will be easier to access the calm pathways in that moment when our brain has to choose which way to go, because it's got a bit more of a motorway into calm because we've practiced it. So it's not just having an ability to access it in that moment. There's a kind of like running a marathon. You don't just run the marathon. You want to spend some time training yourself up so that then running the marathon seems quite easy. If you make change to response, does it go forever with neuroplasticity, or can it come back? Interesting question. I think it depends a bit, in that if we look at the example of phobias, once you've resolved a phobia, it's gone, but people can reinstall it. They can remind themselves again about how awful it is. So it kind of depends how strong the new pathway is, how eroded and erased the old pathway is, and that kind of balance. If the new pathway is super strong and the old pathway is faded quite well, then you should be good. But if they're about even, then it could go either way. George says, hello George, nice to see you. I'd like to ask, how can I get out of crash state twice as fast next time? Well, two things: spot it, be aware when it happens, and secondly, practice the opposite, coach state, relax state, wherever you want, so that you're even more neurologically familiar with it, which is what we're going to do now. So if you're listening to this, make sure you are not driving, operating dangerous machinery, flying aeroplanes, that kind of thing. If you are, pause and do it another time. because we're going to get relaxed, which is something we all have the ability to do. Remember, we have probably experienced most states that are possible to experience. You know, most are on the call of being angry, but you've also probably at some point been calm. You've probably been excited, you've probably been bored, you've probably been focused, you've probably been demotivated. So you already have had experience of relaxation, and deep, deep relaxation, which is what we're going to do now. You just need to remind yourself. So it's not so much learning, it's reconnecting. So take a few moments to get yourself relaxed, snuggle down in the chair, snuggle your cat, whatever you guys are doing, and just listen to the sound of my voice. Those of you who already have learnt how to relax with me before will notice how my voice starts to change, how it starts to slow down. And maybe you'll be aware of that, or the space in between my words, as you allow yourself to drift gently back in time, all the way back to a time that for you is a deeply, deeply, deeply relaxing time. And I don't know, out of all the hundreds and thousands of moments in your life that you've experienced, that you've chosen, it may be something that you think about often, or something that you haven't thought about for a while, but as you do, I'd like you to just drift. Drift to that place where it just feels calm, relaxing, gentle, and enjoyable. And as you do, become more aware of the feelings of calm that flow through you. And I'd like you to imagine, as you do, that you are a water drop in this waterfall you can see behind me. Just drifting gently down, through the beautiful, fresh, clear air, and landing gently, joining the water below. Cool, calm, and as the water gently, softly flows away, follow that water drop in your mind. Does it flow this way around the logs? Does it rest on the rocks before slipping back into the water? Does it go over there where the sun is dappling the water, warming it ever so gently? And as it leaves, follow it, leaving behind the pool and flowing out. And it comes further down the journey to an interesting part of the river where it could flow this way. And as you look, you can see the water down that way is turbulent. It's white and frothy, twists and turns. Maybe you just like to float up and look beneath your feet, down there. You can see the frothing river. You can see how the trees have been bent by the water and its passage. How some of the stumps of the trees are broken. The logs have fallen. And you can look at the other side, the other channel, where the water just seems to flow in a more gentle, peaceful way. And further on down you can see that both water courses rejoin eventually. But the water drops in one have had a much more enjoyable, comfortable journey. And as you look, you might ask yourself, some interesting questions and be intrigued as to what you learn as you float higher. The river becomes smaller and smaller below you. And you can notice there are many rivers, some wide enough to carry boats carrying precious cargo, some that used to be busy waterways but now, as a result of changes in the way the water's flowed over the years, they've become trickles or dry old riverbeds, always remodeling. And the more the water flows through the larger channels, the wider and more travel and traffic they become. That's just natural. A long, long time ago, they used to take cattle to market. And they used to do it regularly, year in, year out, month after month. It took a while to collect the cows together and then to herd them down the little windy lanes between the fields. And as the oxen and cows wandered through, they trampled the grass, they ate the hedges, and those pathways become, over the years, well worn, deeply furrowed by the cows' hooves. But of course, as the cows pass, they leave a little gift behind as a result of eating all the goodness on the way. But because the cows come this way all the time, the pathways kept clear by the munching, the travelling of the feet and the hooves. And one day, something happens. A road is built, which works better for the carts and eventually the lorries, trucks, that need to get from the farms to the towns. The route's more direct. It's easier and faster. So the cows, the cow herders, don't travel along the old routes anymore. But the years and years of fertilization provide the most abundant soil, that if you were to return to one of those old routes, long abandoned, it'd be very, very difficult to see it. The verdant green overgrowth that's reclaimed the land makes it almost impossible to remember where it was, because it seems to be just part of the blank canvas of the landscape once again. And with time, as man invents new ways to travel, maybe that don't involve wheels, we fly in our hover cars, our jetpacks, or balloons. The roads will be reclaimed too. First, the tiny little weeds find their way through the cracks in the tarmac, and now there's no wheels to squash them. Before you know it, their movement breaks that apparently solid, hard substance to tiny pieces as it too reclaims the area that once was just land too. And so, as you allow yourself to learn what you need, letting that go through your whole body, from your feet, toe, knee, your hips, to your heart, connecting with what it feels like in a new kind of way that surprises you, that you can be this new way, a new kind of approach, one that considers others as well as yourself, recognizing that we are all children of our past, but just like being children of our parents, who informed us and taught us some things that were correct and some things that maybe needed additional things to make them more accurate. We can step away and let go of those elements of our past that don't help us create the future that we want to write and we want to read about in the future. As we look back now, looking back to now from the future, noticing this transition moment in our lives where we saw things differently and we decided to take a different path. And so when you're ready, you can allow yourself to bring yourself back, letting the gentle sound, the water coming from the rain that flows throughout the whole world, bringing yourself back to now, complete and renewed in your own time. And so, making sure that you've all returned with a new understanding of how you can be calm, do have that capacity. We shall end now with you recognizing there is even more, that you are enough, and there is even more.